This is a book called Little Pieces of the West Wind. The story is by Christian Garrison and the pictures by Diane Good. Once there was a clever old man who had lost his socks. "I know a way to get back my socks," said the clever old man to himself. He opened his door and all of the windows and then sat down to wait for the west wind. That afternoon, the west wind came blustering through the open door and windows of the cabin. Just as the west wind entered, the clever old man jumped up, slammed shut the door, and closed all of the windows with a bang. "Ha!" he said to the west wind. "I have caught you!" Sure enough, the wild west wind blew and bounced about inside the cabin, but was unable to get away. "What do you want of me, old man?" bellowed the west wind. "I have lost my socks, and I want you to find them for me," said the clever old man. "I am the wild and reckless west wind. I work for no man," wailed the west wind. He swelled and blew and crashed against the window, but could not find so much as a tiny crack to seep through. The clever old man chuckled, and the west wind finally agreed to do as he asked. "But I do not trust you, west wind, so I will keep a little piece of you here with me until you return with my socks." With that, the clever old man pulled off a piece of the west wind and wrapped it in a rug. Then he opened the window, and what was left of the mighty west wind blew away to look for the clever old man's socks. Soon the west wind came upon a woodchopper who was wearing socks on his hands. "You make a funny sight with socks on your hands," said the west wind with a whistle. "Who cares?" grunted the woodchopper without looking up. "Where are your gloves?" asked the west wind. "Lost," grumbled the woodchopper. "Let me have those socks," hissed the west wind. "No," said the woodchopper, "not unless you find my gloves." The west wind sputtered and howled. At last he agreed to do as the woodchopper asked. "But I do not trust you, west wind, so I will keep a little piece of you here with me until you return with my gloves." With that, the woodchopper chopped off a piece of the west wind and put it inside a hollow log and stopped up the hole, and what was left of the mighty west wind blew through the trees to look for the woodchopper's gloves. Soon the west wind came upon a gypsy who was wearing a pair of gloves on her head. "You make a funny sight with gloves on your head," wailed the west wind. "Goodness me, do I?" giggled the gypsy, blushing from head to toe. "Have you no scarf?" the west wind asked. "I cannot find it anywhere," she said. "I would like to have those gloves," said the west wind. "I should say not, you silly wind," snapped the gypsy. "But if you bring me back my scarf, then you may have these gloves." The west wind shook the trees and rustled the leaves, but finally agreed to do as she asked. "But I do not trust you, west wind, so I will keep a little piece of you here with me until you return with my scarf." With that, the gypsy pinched off a piece of the west wind and placed it inside her tea tin, where she kept her tea leaves, and what was left of the once mighty west wind wandered away to look for the gypsy's scarf. Soon the west wind came upon a sheep who had a scarf around his leg. "You make a funny sight with that scarf around your leg," wheezed the west wind. "Bah!" cried the sheep. "Why are you wearing that scarf?" the west wind asked. "Because I have lost my blue ribbon I won at the fair," sobbed the sheep. "Give me the scarf, sheep," said the west wind. "No," said the sheep. "Go find my blue ribbon, and then I shall gladly give you this scarf." The west wind was too tired by now to fuss and fume, and he agreed to do as the sheep asked. "But I do not trust you, west wind, so I will keep a little piece of you here with me until you return with my blue ribbon." With that, the sheep bit off a piece of the west wind and stuffed it under his haystack to keep. And what was left of the once mighty west wind floated off to look for the sheep's blue ribbon. Soon the west wind came upon a bird who had a blue ribbon in her tail. "You make a funny sight with that blue ribbon in your tail," whispered the west wind. "You would too," chirped the bird. "Have you lost your tail feather?" the west wind asked. "Yes, indeed," sang she. "May I please have that blue ribbon, bird?" whined the west wind. "You may not," said the bird. "Find my tail feather, and you may have this blue ribbon." All the west wind could do was sigh and agree to do as the bird asked. "But I do not trust you, west wind, so I will keep a little piece of you here with me until you return with my tail feather." With that, the bird pecked off a piece of the west wind and stuck it under her nest to keep. By now, the west wind was nothing more than a puff of breeze as he went to look for the bird's tail feather. At last, the west wind came upon a little girl who was playing with a feather. "Please give me your feather, young lady," sighed the west wind. "I can barely hear you. Why do you whisper, and who are you?" the little girl asked. "The mighty west wind," said he. "Why, you are nothing more than a tiny puff of breeze," she replied. "That is because others have pulled, chopped, pinched, bitten, and pecked away little pieces of me," the west wind whispered. "I will give you this feather, west wind, but will you come back to see me every afternoon to cool me off and keep me company?" He was too weak to refuse, so the tiny puff of breeze that once was the mighty west wind took the feather and went away to keep all of the bargains he had made that day. The bird got back her tail feather and returned the blue ribbon and the little piece of wind. The sheep got back his blue ribbon and returned the scarf and the little piece of wind. The gypsy got back her scarf and returned the pair of gloves and the little piece of wind. The woodchopper got back his gloves and returned the pair of socks and the little piece of wind. The west wind was growing mighty and strong again by the time he arrived at the cabin of the clever old man. "Come out, old man. I have returned with your socks, and I want the piece of me you are keeping." Gladly the clever old man unwrapped the rug and let out the piece of wind he was keeping there, and that made the west wind whole again. The clever old man chuckled and sat down to put on his socks as the mighty west wind blustered away. The end.